No, we're thrilled to have Mac Kreider here. He is the wine manager at On the Rocks, 1818 Massachusetts Street. And Mac, you were telling me earlier that you're not a sommelier yet. What does that mean? You're studying for the
I am studying. There's a lot of work. Yeah.
What is that like? I mean, like what kind of time frame and generally speaking, in a non-COVID world, how long would that take?
Most people say like 3 years, like 2 or 3 years. I've been working on wine for about 1.5 years. But working at a liquor store makes it a lot easier because I can taste stuff all the time. And that's half of it, really. I mean, just, knowing what stuff tastes like, that's kind of the whole deal. But, a lot of reading, a lot of talking with people who are sommeliers or have their CSW or certification in some kind of wine is really nice, and it helps a lot.
I did want to mention too that I'm sitting in front of the French vineyard that we will talk about with the Pinot Noir tonight. So it's really, it's really charming.
Yeah.
That's the winery itself, I believe.
Yep.
Anyway, well, so with that, I will just let you take it away. We did put out a note for people to be airing out their wine, right? We want it to breathe a little before we taste. So
especially the Pinot Noir. Yep.
Okay. So open that up, and Matt's going to tell us what to do. Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So the first one that I've already actually got a little bit in my glass here is the Joseph Durand Burgundy or Burgundy. And actually there are different names for this region. In Germany, they call it Burgund. Central West France. But I know in previous iterations, you guys have talked a little bit more about place and space, and I'm going to do a little bit of that, but really what we're looking at is Thanksgiving. And Pinot Noir is kind of the classic turkey wine. And so in this case, these guys are masters of Pinot Noir. This particular wine is kind of like a vineyard blend. So if you think about Burgundy, so many different vineyards, so many different small regions. And, you even talk about Beaujolais too. That's kind of grouped in with Burgundy. But really it's Pinot Noir and Chardonnay is what we're looking at. And even, with like Louis Jadot, a very famous winemaker, they have 100 different wines and they're made of 2 different grapes, which are Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So lots of variation in the terroir here. This is kind of an intro to Burgundy, as they're taking a lot of like leftover juice and stuff like that from all their vineyards, and they are making a blend. And that is a really good way to get into a region. But you'll probably find, as you kind of explore these kinds of regions, as you get further and further in, they can be quite different from one another. So this is a good intro. And one thing that I really like about this company, Just Drawn, it's run by I believe it's his granddaughter, Veronique. She runs this winery in Burgundy, and then she also runs a winery in Willamette in Oregon, where they're also very famous for Pinot Noir, but of a slightly different style, maybe a little bit more red, or ruby red is kind of what they look for, a little more clarity in the wine, a little fruitier, super fun. So she's constantly balancing between 2 wineries, which I think is heroic, to say the least. So this one here, I guess I've kind of been sipping on it. Really what we're looking for is something that's like a medium body, something that has some fruit quality to it, but isn't super intense on sweetness, still has a nice little faint tannin, and some acid is really the key here. And you've probably, if you've been on here for a while, you've probably seen me doing this thing. That's kind of why the wine glass is shaped like this. I don't know if people have talked about it in previous meetings, but in this case, I do this to coat the sides of the glass, and that encourages evaporation of the wine so that you can get it into your nose holes a little bit better. That's kind of the whole idea. So, I'm obviously, if I'm drinking at home, I'm not, meditating on it for the entire time. I do it for a little bit and then I just go after it. But in this case, you're getting kind of that earthy quality that you look for in like Burgundy. The acid comes out nicely, and lots of like stewed dark fruits, almost like a boysenberry kind of thing, like a black raspberry kind of thing, little cherry, a little strawberry, all kinds of fruit, super fun. What I like about this wine is that it has a slight herbal quality to it that's kind of understated. So it's something that goes really well with food, in almost like that herbal quality like kind of adds to whatever you're eating too. But it also, perfect thing for in between bites. So I really love these guys. Actually, little fun fact about me, this wine is the first wine that I ever held a wine tasting on when I've been working it on the rocks. So this is kind of a little special favorite of mine, and I get it every once in a while. So yeah, there's that one. And then the second wine, which after I finish this, I will get to that. It is a Montepulciano De Bruzzo. Italian naming conventions for wine get really confusing really, really fast. They are kind of notorious for that in the old world of wine, which is like, Spain, Greece, France, and Italy. And so Montepulciano is both a place and a grape, and there's no intersection. So Montepulciano the grape is typically found in Abruzzo. Montepulciano the place is actually made of Sangiovese grapes. They love to confuse us. And that's why people study wine, because there's so much confusing stuff that can happen with all of this.
While you're sipping, I was thinking it'd be fun if you guys are getting any notes like herb fragrances, rosemary, as specific as you can, put them in the chat and I'll read them out loud. And that way we can sort of act like we're all in a room together.
I love that.
We've never done that before, but yeah, you can just type in the chat what you're picking up and what you're tasting or what you're smelling, and I'll share it with everybody.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's one of my favorite ways to share wine, actually, is to have people tell me what they taste, because I imagine that we all didn't eat the same thing for lunch today. And that does affect the palate, even with it like hours out. When was the last time you brushed your teeth? How much water have you drank today? Like that kind of stuff. It all affects it. So I'm excited to hear what people are seeing, smelling, tasting, and all that. Got a question. Question about, do they add anything other than grapes? Did I see that right?
Let me get my chat pulled up.
Yeah, that's me.
Yes, other fruit.
Yeah. So no. Well, no. Okay, kind of. So throughout the winemaking process, it depends. Usually no other fruit. It's most people, I'd say 99% of winemakers, especially in the old world, there are literally laws of what you can grow and what you can put in your wine. If you break those laws, then you will be fined heavily. And it's usually like a sense of like traditionalism, and you can't grow Syrah unless it's by El Boro and stuff like that. So in this case, Burgundy, that's Pinot Noir. There are exceptions to every one of these rules for the most part. But old school wines, old school wineries, they typically still do the old school methods. And that usually involves fining using egg whites or fish bladders. And that's part of the reason why, people get kind of dicey about vegan wine. That's been something that's been kind of an issue for the past few years. So I guess like, you're not going to taste anything that they add to it, because it's usually like, maybe they'll add some sulfites or they'll add some tartaric acid to bump up the acid a little bit to kind of balance it. But it's not going to be the star of the show by any sense of the matter. Like, it's always, you're tasting grapes. So what I was talking about with Montepulciano is, this is the reason why we picked this wine, is because I think kind of the classic Thanksgiving pairing is Pinot Noir. And everybody always says, what am I drinking? You Google it, they usually say Pinot Noir rosé is typically what people are going for. And you can do that. This Pinot Noir, we kind of lucked out. to $20 Pinot Noir from Burgundy. That is very inexpensive for Burgundy. It breaches into the $100 price range extremely quickly. You talk about Grand Cru Mercury or stuff like that, like it jumps way up, and that's the stuff that, you know, we don't carry it on the rocks, but we'll probably order it in if you're interested in that kind of thing. It's, you know, it's whatever. It's like it's good. It's really good, but you know, you can also drink a great wine for $15 and be perfectly fine. So the reason why we picked this, I could have done 2 or 3 Pinot Noirs or something. We picked a Montepulciano because it's quite similar to Pinot Noir. It typically has that like bright fruit, a good acid. It's lighter. And I was just talking about this with Kathleen and Kathy earlier about chilling these wines. That's typically how I enjoy, you know, Pinot Noir. If you go a little bit north from Burgundy, that's Beaujolais. That's Gamay Noir, Montepulciano, kind of like easygoing reds. A slight chill does them really well. It helps douse their tannin just a tad, and it also makes them taste a little bit less sweet too. And that is the same reason why you chill like tawny port, for example, or why some people say that whiskey tastes better cold. You try to douse that sweetness a little bit so you can kind of explore what else is going on underneath. And that's what I did. I usually recommend for these wines, you don't have to, but I usually recommend about like 20 minutes in the fridge. That's usually enough to get it down to cellar temp.
So that's what you call a light chill then. Don't put it in the fridge that morning and right, 20 minutes is all it takes.
Yeah, 20 to 30. I mean, really, you're trying to get it below room temperature. That's kind of the whole idea.
Oh, okay.
And one thing that I've learned, especially with like nicer Pinot Noir, like this one, I would call this a nicer Pinot Noir, honestly. Temperature, you're gonna taste a difference. It's actually kind of shocking sometimes. Drouin does a wine called Cloudblind out of Willamette in Oregon. And that was the other wine that I did on my first tasting ever. And I served it at room temperature and people were like, oh, this is all right. And then I tried it later that day, chilled, and it was a different wine. So keep that in mind, play with temperature. That's a really fun thing that I always, you know, advise people in the store with is temperature can, you know, it can change wine. With these ones, it's not going to be like super apparent, but there are certain ones that will do that with. So it's a lot of fun. I'm kind of thinking maybe I should get a different wine glass or maybe dump this so I can get that Montepulciano going here.
Okay. Well, I was also wondering if you can hear me.
Yeah.
When you talk about pairing with a Thanksgiving meal,
Yes.
you know, Thanksgiving is not just the turkey. In fact, I have friends who think it's all about the sides, and the turkey is just sort of
I'm a big potato man, so I definitely agree with that.
So is that what people take into consideration when, I mean, because you may have a sweet potato casserole with marshmallows. I won't, but you might. And then you might have Brussels sprouts, and then you might have, you know, a salad. And so how does all that work when you're pairing?
So that's perfect that you brought that up, because that's one of the main points I wanted to bring up. There's kind of this common misconception with wine, and it's that people think that there are rules of how to enjoy it. There are no rules. You can, like, I've experienced pairings that make sense, but the thing with the Thanksgiving meal, and the reason why a lot of people recommend kind of like lighter reds or like rosés that are just kind of like easygoing, maybe have a little acid, a little fruit, is because there's so much going on there. I mean, you can prepare a turkey in how many different ways, you know, and they're all going to pair with different things. You know, if you do a deep fried turkey, well, maybe you want like a higher acid, like Barbaresco or something, but that's just kind of getting into the semantics of balance. And that's, for me, that's why I think it's less important to think of like, you know, what kind of wine should I pair with? And it comes more into the idea of understanding how acid and tannin and fruit interact with your tongue. It's the same way that you learn to cook, you know, like, oh, that needs some salt. Oh, no, that needs some lemon, that kind of thing. It's all about balance. And there are even different camps about pairings. You know, people say like you should pair red wine with steak. And you can. I've done white wine with steak and it works just fine. If it's a nice juicy steak and you get like a really high acid dry Riesling, like it's money. So it's really all in the eye of the beholder about the pairing. These are, you know, kind of the classics for pairings. And that is because of that, like I said, that kind of like lighter idea. They're kind of, even like I have the tech sheet for this Montepulciano that I'm about to pour really quick. And, you know, a lot of times they'll mention pairings on these tech sheets. And this one literally says, it is an ideal food wine, perfect to pair with a wide range of dishes. So that's kind of the whole idea here, right? Like, and Thanksgiving dinner looks different all across the country. I don't have mac and cheese with Thanksgiving dinner. That's not what I think of, but I'm also not from the South. So I actually have not had this Madia yet, this Montepulciano. So I'm going to give that a quick tasty taste. I don't know if anybody's said anything more about notes in the chat yet.
No, they haven't.
Okay.
No, people are holding back with their notes.
Okay, cool. So.
Yeah, the Smiths actually weighed in. And,
Oh, they did? I didn't see that.
yeah,
Oh,
I
no.
think it just came to me. Tart cherry plum undertones.
Yes, definitely.
Very
Excellent.
good,
And
Smiths.
that's for the Burgundy. Yeah, it is a rather high acid Pinot Noir, and I appreciate that because I'm actually quite sensitive to acid, like taste wise. But for food, that's great. That's a good one. This Montepulciano, I'm immediately getting licorice, like black licorice like anise on the nose. It smells very savory. And this is kind of a funny thing too, is when you try a bunch of wines from different places, you'll notice like different kinds of earthiness coming out of them. French wine tends to be really clean. Napa wine can kind of be all over the place, honestly, like California and like American wine. It's kind of the Wild West, honestly, of wine. So it can be all over the place, but like Italian has like a certain like almost leathery earthiness to it. And that's what I'm getting on the nose here. It smells savory to me. And then Spain, it's like dirt, like in a really good way. I love Spanish wine too, but that's kind of what we're getting here with this Montepulciano. Oh, that's delightful. That's fun. I like this one.
I like that too.
Yeah, I actually, it might be my favorite of the two. And so like I was saying earlier, you know, with the Pinot Noir thing, you can spend a ton of money on Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is extremely difficult to grow. It literally clones itself in the field. So, you know, at the beginning of the year, you think you have one like specific varietal, and at the end of the year, you have a field blend, and you have to like completely change your winemaking process if you're not careful. That's part of the reason why it's so expensive. Also, land in Burgundy turns out pretty pricey. So people have to pay for the houses that they live in too. And it's also backbreaking work to hand pick grapes. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget about too. So there are always alternatives to like the classics for the most part. I mean, there are some like irreplicable wines out there. You know, you talk about like Chateauneuf du Pape, you talk about like Nebbiolo when it's grown in Barolo, that kind of thing. But like with Pinot Noir, you can work around it a little bit. California has some great Pinot Noirs. These guys do really good work, and I'm super happy that we're able to carry French wine during these trying times right now, because that's kind of an issue right now. But you don't have to spend the $30, $40, $50 on that Burgundy. You can get an entry-level one like this, or you can get, honestly, my favorite wine of the two right now, which is the Montepulciano.
Well, we have a note. Eugene Stoker says a flowery flavor that wasn't in the first one. Sorry for the tongue twister.
Oh yeah, it does have like kind of a floral thing going on. That's for sure.
And I'll add from Rita that the Italian one is a little too earthy for me. It's full bodied.
Yes. So that's another thing too, right? I mean, some people just don't like that earthiness, and that is totally fine.
Yeah.
You know, that's why French wine's around. That's why Napa wine's around, or Mendocino wine is around. So yeah, that's good to know. I mean, Italian wine will typically have that earthiness. It's not always the case, but that's kind of a general rule of thumb. Like for me, I'm smelling this and I'm like, that smells like Italian wine to me.
I think I would like to unmute Scott Morgan so he could ask his question in person.
Yeah.
Oh, that's mine.
Oh, is that yours?
Yeah.
Oh,
You mean
Oh, yours? Did you
my
have one too?
yes.
Oh, go ahead. You go first.
You know why I'm making you do this? Because I can't
No.
pronounce the second wine.
This is the Morgan.
I know what
Award.
it is, but I
No,
can't pronounce it.
I just asked, I didn't know there were requirements to speak that, if my family should be ashamed because we have always had whites with Thanksgiving,
No.
like Chardonnay and Gewürztraminer.
Yeah, Gewürztraminer. Yes.
No, see, that's where my family should be ashamed because in our house it was Gewürztraminer.
And that's just fine.
You know?
It means the
We
I knew
actually
what
just
you
called
meant.
it.
No rules, man. No rules.
No rules. Yeah. Leave them at the door. Yeah, no, I mean, white wine is perfect. It does the same thing that we're looking at here, right? Gewürztraminer is kind of an exception because it's like kind of robust for white wine, but it's light. It has good acid to it. Hell, you can cook with it, and then one of my favorite things to do with pairings is cook with a wine and then drink the rest with whoever I'm cooking with, because that is like that merriment of, you get like an unfiltered Arnaise and some potato soup, and that's money in the bank. So yeah, I mean, drink what you like. Like that's really what it comes down to. I mean, I'll probably be drinking whiskey with my Thanksgiving meal this year. So who's to say, really? It's really just all what you like, and that's kind of the beauty of trying different wines like this, and asking the people who work at your local wine shop, is there anything new? Is there anything weird? Is there anything different that I should try? Worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to take it home and you don't like it, you take it to your neighbor's house. So be adventurous, try different stuff, and yeah, white wine also goes great with Thanksgiving dinner to kind of wrap that idea up.
So speaking of weird, Kathleen says, I've seen the wine descriptor of wet dog.
Yes.
What is that caused by?
Wow. Okay. That's funny. There is a chemical in wine, and this is actually something that I've talked a lot about with customers. There's a chemical called pyrazine that appears naturally in wine. It appears in some more than others. It is responsible for a wide range of tastes that you can sense, and it is the reason why, some people say that it can taste like green bell peppers, or like jalapeno. It tastes like really green, like herbal, think like rosemary, that kind of thing. It can taste like that, or it can taste like pea or asparagus or wet dog, and it's wild. It's managing pyrazines in the winemaking process is actually really apparently very difficult. I've never made wine, but I've heard it's quite hard, and it has a lot to do with how you tend your grapes. So it's more about like on the field end, but that's not always the case. Like a tell for a lot of like Cabernet Franc versus Cabernet Sauvignon, that's going to be pyrazines. You're going to get that herbal quality. But again, wet dog comes up a lot. So good question. I like that one.
I've got a question. I thought this is a good one. There's a little label on the Italian one that says 92 points, jamessuckling.com.
Yeah.
What is this reference?
So I'm very heavily opinionated on the rating of wine. And this kind of feeds into the idea that you should drink what you like. James Suckling is a very famous wine rater. And when you get more into wine, you go into the wine store and you see all these little shelf talkers, and it's like, well, if it says 89, then I bet it's probably not that great. It's probably, not nearly as good as a 91, when really it plays to your taste. Just like what somebody said, they didn't really like the earthiness. maybe you wouldn't give that a 92, maybe you'd give it a 70. The other thing to note about this is that different raters of wine have different tastes too. And that's something that's kind of overlooked a lot of times. For example, James Suckling tends to rate wines that have rather low acid to them. So as you probably noticed, this one is not nearly as, you don't get that like acidic mouthfeel to it where it has like a bite to it. It's much softer. And that is very, very common for Suckling. The other thing, the kind of back end thing about this too, that I'm not very fond of in the wine industry is that some vineyards will pay off raters to bump their score. That's a thing. So really, they're trying to tell you like, oh, our wine is good. It got 92 points. And meanwhile, like, why would I spend $75 on a Chateauneuf de Pape that got 95 points? There's a lot of intricacies to this. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they nail it. I've had wines that have over 90 ratings and I'm just kind of like, even if they are like $30, $40, I'm just kind of, So it's what I would recommend. And this is the hard way of liking wine, right? Don't look at the numbers, look at the tasting notes on those shelf talkers, because a lot of times when you look below the bottle, it'll say like, hints of violet, or like cherry and leather, like that kind of stuff. That should tell you more about whether or not you're going to like it, and not the number. Just ignore the numbers, even though they're big and shiny.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do for future programs, is just put a few of those descriptors on, for the people that are buying one bottle and not the other, just to have those notes there, because that's probably would be helpful.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
I want to follow up on that just for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Is, having said that about wine raters, is there still a certain publication or a certain website or a wine rater that when you see a 92 or a 90, even higher, you go, okay, that's got it. That's because you generally agree with them. Yeah,
it's Wine Enthusiast.
Wine Enthusiast.
Well, Wine Enthusiast. Every time. I have never been disappointed by a 90 plus Wine Enthusiast wine. I think the reason for that, in the industry, they're kind of considered like the most like brutally honest, which makes them the most reliable. So if you see a good Wine Enthusiast rating, I generally agree with what they have to say.
Okay.
Excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, because there are all kinds of, I think Food and Wine magazine I've seen those cards, and Wine Enthusiast really is the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But I wondered, because there must be a million online by now. Just people, So okay, okay. So did you want to talk more about the? I can't even pronounce it. The second one, or do you want to open it up to questions?
Montepulciano.
Okay.
And then De Bruzzo.
De Bruzzo. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And yeah, I'm good for questions.
Okay. So what we can probably do is show of hands, or you can also put it in the chat. I'm gonna. I have a lot of questions, but I want people to feel free.
Excellent.
Okay, so a lot of us are going to be spending Thanksgiving in very small groups. With us, it will be 3 people. Some will have 2, some will have 1. And so I'm wondering if there's sort of a multi-purpose wine, like if you want to have pumpkin pie after, and maybe you want to have a little cheese and charcuterie, before. And will these wines pull you through that whole 3-course situation? Or
I would say this, or like anything from Beaujolais, which is just north of Burgundy, is sometimes kind of like wrapped into that like region. They grow Gamay there, which is like kind of like a cousin of Pinot Noir in a sense. It's just a little bit lighter, but like for example, On the Rocks has like a bunch of inexpensive cru Beaujolais, so it's like really. These regions are, if you guys are familiar with the layout of Lawrence, the distance between Mass Street and Tennessee Street is north to south how big this region is, like Chenas. So that's the other stuff that I'd recommend too. But yeah, Pinot Noir, Montepulciano De Bruzzo, anything that's just like light and forgiving and that you can just kind of knock back, it's going to go with almost anything you throw at it. And that does wind back to the white wine too. White wine goes with almost everything. So
There you go,
that's my
Scott.
recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah, he's he's feeling validated now.
Excellent.
Okay. So have you ever found a food, not necessarily on the Thanksgiving menu, but is there a food that is just almost impossible or extremely difficult to pair with?
There are some classics.
Oh, okay.
Asparagus is one of them.
Yeah, that would
Brussels
be-
sprouts are one of them. Anything that has like a really deep earthiness to it like that, like it's a little difficult. Some people say that a lot of Asian food is hard to pair with. As a person who is actually pretty well versed in like Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai cuisine, and that's mostly what I cook at home. It can be done. You got to get a little creative, but it can be done. Honestly, when you have trouble pairing something, just drink what you like. With asparagus, there is actually a wine producer here in Lawrence that just started making tomato wine. And
I don't know.
It is good. It is good.
It's good.
Yeah, it tastes like a dry Riesling and also a little bit like a fresh tomato.
Who does that?
Oh shoot. I'm on the spot. I don't know the name.
Yeah,
of the
sorry.
one.
I'll Google it.
Yeah, East Lawrence on the Rocks sells it. It's like $22 a bottle. That was actually when I was still planning on going to see my family for Thanksgiving. That's what I was gonna bring because it's that good.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean,
So is it sweet, like a really ripe tomato, or
it's dry. It's a dry,
super
highly
dry?
acidic wine. Yeah, but it is. That's why I say it tastes a lot like a really dry Riesling. Almost identical. I don't know if you guys have ever had any wines from Finger Lakes in New York, which is a really unique region, very similar to that. So, and that said, if you can't find a wine pairing for something, drink whatever you want.
But you said tomato. I'm stuck on that. You said tomato. Okay, because my mind went to Heinz ketchup.
Okay, it does not taste. I'm not a big
Because
ketchup
I'm not
guy.
that sophisticated. Okay.
No, yeah, of course. So,
Okay.
yeah, tomato wine goes great with a lot of stuff too. It's it's just like elderberry wine does the same thing. Grappa or Amaro do very similar things. It's just all up to your own taste and enjoy what you want to enjoy when it comes down to it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Are there still good wines under $10 a bottle?
Yes.
And I'm not talking Trader Joe's.
Yes, there are.
There are.
Yeah. That's actually something that me and Quina, our sommelier, who we kind of both like tandem do the wine buying at On the Rocks. That's like our unicorn. We're always looking for that one. We're chasing the purple dragon of a wine that's like $10 or under, or even $12 and under, and it knocks. It's super good. They exist. The problem is that, and kind of touching back on the rating thing again, a lot of wines that they just don't make it to what we call in the industry, they don't make it to press, meaning James Suckling does not make that one of his 20,000 wines a year that he tastes or whatever. So they don't have a rating. And that's kind of why, the local wine shop is so key in the wine buying process, where you might want to spend $10 on a bottle of wine. You're not really sure what you're looking for, but you want something that doesn't suck. And like, I can already think of like 3 or 4 wines off the top of my head that fit that key. It's all about tasting everything you can, really.
I think Rita has a question.
Okay.
I'll unmute you. You have to unmute yourself. You do that? I'm trying to.
Yeah, okay. All
There
right.
you go.
I just wanted to say I've had the tomato wine. It was by someone in Leavenworth, and it's pretty flavorful. But I put it into a salad dressing with vinegar and oil, and that makes it really good.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
That's a great idea.
Actually, these guys are new, the ones in Lawrence.
Is it Irvine's?
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Irvine,
Okay, they're
that's the
north. Yeah, I looked it up and they're,
Or is it North Lawrence? Maybe I got
Yeah.
that wrong.
right,
Okay.
no, it is North Lawrence, you're right.
Yeah. Also, if you guys want to go visit them, literally just call them. It's a husband and wife, and their son runs their lab, and that's pretty much it. They love guests. Maybe wait a little while until everything cools down a little bit, but they do love having people in. So, one of the things that I recommended to them when they were showing me this wine was show this to restaurants so that they can cook with it, and also try making vermouth out of this. Was my other one, and that kind of raised their eyebrows a little bit. But high acid wine with the addition of wormwood, which makes vermouth what it is, and also fortification, which is like brandy or something. I think that'd be a pretty fun combo. So
The tomato wine might go good with the Bloody Mary.
oh, that's the other thing
That's
too.
true.
They
That's a good
recommend
idea.
yeah, they recommend adding that into Bloody Marys. Actually, I haven't tried it yet, but I need to. Yeah.
That's great.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Especially for the people who, eat Thanksgiving dinner at noon and,
Yeah.
then hit the couch at 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a tomato wine Bloody
There's-
Mary.
Another question in the chat about the Italian wine. How long would you suggest as the duration for the or the longevity of it? So how long will it last, open, I guess, is I think that's-
Open.
Mhm. I guess let's say
so-
open and unopened.
Okay. Unopened, that is something that I have a little bit less familiarity with. Thankfully, I have the tech sheet from this company. They recommend up to 5 years after the vintage. There are ways of figuring that out, but it's very nuanced. So I'm not quite there yet. I'm still pretty new to wine in the grand scheme of things. Open. For this one, I'd probably say, okay, before I go any further, always store your wine in the fridge. After you open it, pop it in the fridge if you're not going to finish it that night. That will slow down the oxidation and it will make it last a lot longer. Same with vermouth. If you guys use vermouth for cocktails, I always tell people you'll get a couple months out of a bottle of vermouth as opposed to just a few days. In this case, open on the counter, I'd give it maybe 6 hours. Open and then resealed in the fridge, I'd probably give it about 3 days before it starts getting a little too acidic. So that's kind of the general guess I've got here.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
So in that case, how does it pair with turkey sandwiches on white bread and Miracle Whip? Not my idea.
That is one of my favorite ways to spend the day after Thanksgiving, actually. I'm a big fan of the sandwich, big fan of mayonnaise. So
Yeah, mayonnaise. Yeah, I was kind of going way back in my life, but yeah, mayonnaise, no white bread, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, in that case, because you're adding, bread, you're adding something creamy probably to kind of reconstitute the moisture of that sandwich. A day after wine might even be better with that because it's going to have a little bit higher acid to it, and it'll have opened up a little bit too. So yeah, I would highly recommend that.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions from anyone? Yeah, I can see. I mean, I can see how the sides when you said mac and cheese, which is of course Southern, but Merchants is including it in their Thanksgiving meal package and stuff. And then the the green bean casserole with the mushroom soup and the all of that is pretty. It would need a little acid, I would think, just to cut through all of that.
Definitely, yeah, and that's kind of the whole thing. And I'm going to come back to the white wine again. I'm sorry, I have to. That acid is key. High acid wines go well with heavy food because it cuts it, and you don't feel like you're tasting that fat for however long. It eradicates it, and then you can start anew with the next bite, which is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Has anyone been to either of these regions in their travels or close by anyway?
Ooh, I would love to hear that.
Me too. I want to go there.
I actually, yeah, me too. It looks beautiful.
Isn't it just charming?
It is, yeah.
So where
Are
would
that-
Italian vineyard be like close to, just like city-wise in Italy?
It varies.
Okay.
Typically you're thinking like rural, right?
Mhm.
You know, it's probably like a couple minutes drive outside of like a smallish town is typically what you're looking at. But in some cases, you know, you've got vineyards that are a few miles outside of Turin and it's like a city. And then you've
Yeah.
got these wine grapes that are growing out there because that's where it makes sense for them to do it, because that's what they've been doing this whole time. And the city grows and the wine stays because it works. So it just depends.
Okay. Just-
So the winemaker from the first one that also has the vineyard in, did you say Oregon?
Yeah, in Oregon.
Yeah. Do they do Pinots there as well?
Yes, they do. Yeah, so Oregon is actually quite well known for Pinot Noir, like internationally even. And yeah, that was kind of the whole idea. Part of the reason they're doing it is because of problems they've been experiencing and like kind of preparation for climate change. So that is definitely like fed into a lot of like what they have to do next, you know, with their vineyards. But part of it is just they're darn good at growing Pinot Noir, and they thought, hey, let's try in one of the best regions in the world, which is Willamette Valley in Oregon. So
Interesting.
Yep.
You mentioned port before.
Yeah.
And I really like a good port, you know, just
Oh, yeah.
for dessert. I like it
Uh-huh.
almost better than dessert itself, but
same.
do you have one to
No.
recommend that's affordable and, you know,
Yeah.
just would be good after a big, giant meal?
Yes, one of my favorites actually, and port gets expensive really fast.
Mhm.
My favorite is $14, and
Do
it
tell.
is, yeah. So it's actually not from Portugal, so it's not technically port. They call it Victoria Tawny because it's grown and made in Australia. But yeah, $13.99 a bottle on the shelf. It's by R.L. Bowler, and those guys, you know what they're doing. I think last holiday was like holiday season was the last time I held a tasting on that, and people were kind of blown away by it. It is sweet, and I wouldn't recommend more than a glass of it, but it's great. It's got a lot of spice. It's got the stewed strawberry you're looking for. Like, it's fun. So yeah,
Good.
that's what I recommend.
Well, why don't we do a quick survey and put in the chat which bottle you like best and which you think would complement your turkey dinner better.
Yeah,
One
do
or
it.
two. So one was the Pinot Noir.
Yep.
From France, and then I still can't pronounce that. Number two, this Italian.
Yeah, you can just say Madia. That's fine.
Madia. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madia I can say. All right.
Yeah.
So everybody put in the chat and I'll read the results of what you think before we say goodbye, unless anybody else has any questions. We've got a 2.
Yeah.
Madia is a 2. Number 1, number 2. It's pretty evenly split.
Oh, good.
So good choices. Yeah.
They did
Yeah.
a good
So
yeah,
far,
that's
pretty,
great.
definitely
Both
number
really
one.
good.
Definitely number 1.
Mhm.
Can you think off the top of your head while I'm tabulating? I'm not really tabulating.
It sounds pretty close.
Yeah, it's very close. Can
Yeah.
you think of those good $10 bottles off the top of your head, the names? Or
Yeah, sure.
Everybody
I
write
don't-
these down.
yeah, I want to write them down too. It's going to be a long winter.
Absolutely.
So the first one that our sommelier Quinna and I recommend constantly, it's a Bordeaux actually, which is funny because Bordeaux is also responsible for some of the most expensive wine in the world. But this one is $10 a bottle. It's $9.99 on the shelf. It's called Laverne, and
Okay.
it's Laver Gne, I think. I'm no good at French. It's something along those lines. Great Bordeaux. Super. I mean, the tannin is there, the acid's there, which is what I look for. I think I've mentioned that. It's great. It's got a lot of fruit to it. It does well with a decanter. If you guys have not been shown the beauty of having a vessel to put your wine in to air it out, that is kind of key for a lot of wines, especially heavier ones like that. The other one, well, in general, I recommend Spain and Portugal wines.
Yeah.
They're just less expensive. And the one that I recommend frequently is actually, I would put it in the same category with these wines. It is a blend of Portuguese grapes, but it's called Cabriz, Cabriz.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's got like a white pepper note to it. That's really fun that I look for in high-end Pinot Noir, but it's apparent in this $11 bottle of wine.
Wow.
So yeah. And I mean, obviously I got way more. There's two to check out.
It's just a
Go
teaser.
for it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe we could get those from you later, and we'll send them in the follow-up notes, which
Yeah,
we
that'd be great.
typically
That'd
do.
be awesome.
Yeah.
So Cheryl wants to know, if we don't have a specific decanter, do you have any suggestions for other vessels to use?
Oh, this is a funny one. If you have a blender, that works really well, like really well.
You turn it on?
Yeah,
Turn it on. Yeah, you let
Oh,
it rip.
seriously?
Yeah, seriously. So if you've, like, a lot of decanters have these features on them to increase the surface area to air contact of wine, right? That is how you maximize oxidation, and that's how you're maximizing the breathing process, right? When you put it in a blender, you get a lot of bubbles, and you're stirring it really quickly. You turn it on for like a few seconds, you take it out, you pour it out, it tastes like a different wine. So I recommend that. And actually, I have a little aerator somewhere. I don't know where it's at. I've got the stand for it. That's all I'm good for right now. But it just goes straight into the top of the wine bottle. And I've got a tiny little apartment, so I don't have room for all these fancy glasses and stuff. So it works very well. I was actually surprised by how well it works.
and wouldn't a pitcher work well too? Just a water pitcher?
That's essentially what a decanter is just a fancy looking pitcher.
Yeah.
So yeah, that any vessel really. If you don't have that and you don't want to worry about that, the way that I typically air wine is just opening it like 30 or 40 minutes before I want to drink it and setting it on my counter. That is perfectly acceptable. In fact, when I did wine tastings weekly at On the Rocks, that's what I would do, about an hour or so, or up to 2 hours, depending on the wine, pop it, set it on the counter in the break room, and then I'd come back and taste it, and it's different wine. It's great.
Corolla, you have a question with a word I can't pronounce, so I'm going to let you and your beautiful accent ask it.
Well, it's a little off the subject, but it is about wine. Have you gotten the glue wine in yet?
Yes, we have. Just a couple days ago.
Okay, I'll be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Excellent.
And
Excellent.
what is, well, wait. What is that?
It's the malt wine from Germany.
Malt?
Malt.
Mold, MULLED.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you've ever like put like spices into like a hot cider, very similar set of spices are being put into wine, and it's often served warm. It is delightful. That would be another alternative to port, actually. If you want to spend a little bit less and you want like a good, like sweeter wine that has a lot of spice to it and is excellent for dessert, I highly recommend trying Glühwein at some point. Super fun stuff.
Would it go with pumpkin pie?
Oh yeah.
Sounds like it.
Oh yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Scott Morgan has made this really competitive. He said those who say number one, if you like number one, the Pinot Noir, Scott is calling you enemies of the state, just for the record. He feels strongly, apparently, about number two.
Really done like the French. I don't know.
I don't know, but anyway, it's so it was
Scott just
pretty.
became
So we
friends.
have Medea was 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, definitely 1. Yeah, so pretty even. So that means you did a good job, Mac.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm elated.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions before we go? No? Okay.
Unmute people so we can all say thank you.
Yeah, let's do.
Do that. I lost the keys to the kingdom.
Oh, you made
I
me
guess
the
you-
host.
Yeah, you can unmute yourselves. Probably it's the easiest way to do it.
Yeah,
There
Thank you
go.
so
we'll-
much.
We'll give you a
Thank
nice
you.
round of applause.
Yay, thank you.
There you go. Yay, Mac.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Thank you. Can't wait to come get my $10 wines.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. We'll try to get that. We'll try to get that short list. I know it's probably not a liquor store manager's dream to send out a list of the cheapest good wines you have.
I
But
honestly,
we'll throw
I
in some
love
port and stuff like that. We'll do that.
Excellent.
Happy
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, everybody. I know it's going to be a weird one and not as happy for everybody, but have a good wine and cheers to you and cheers to 2021 and cheers to Mac.